There is a truth that most people will spend their entire lives running from, and it is this: your outer world is nothing more than a reflection of your inner world. Everything you have built, everything you have failed to build, every relationship you have nurtured and every one you have let decay, every achievement you have claimed and every dream you have quietly surrendered, all of it, without exception, traces back to one single source: the mind. Not luck, not circumstance, not the family you were born into or the economy you inherited or the opportunities that did or did not find their way to your door. The mind. Master that, and success does not merely become possible, it becomes inevitable. Success is something you attract by the person you become. Read that again. Not something you chase, not something you demand, not something the world owes you. Something you attract. And attraction, in this sense, is not magic. It is not wishful thinking. It is the natural consequence of becoming the kind of person whose thinking, whose habits, whose discipline, and whose character create the conditions in which success has no choice but to appear. You do not go out and get success. You become the person success is drawn to. And that process, that becoming, starts entirely, completely, and without exception in the mind. Now think about what that means for you today. If success is something you attract by the person you become, then the question you must ask yourself honestly is not, what do I need to do? The deeper question is, who do I need to become? Because the doing follows the being, always. A person who thinks like someone defeated will act like someone defeated no matter what strategy they are handed. A person who thinks like someone capable, disciplined, and worthy of great things will find a way to act in alignment with that belief, no matter what obstacles appear in the road. The mind sets the direction. Everything else follows. Now ask yourself honestly, what direction is your mind setting right now? Not what direction you wish it were setting, not the direction you tell other people it is setting when they ask how you are doing. What direction is your mind actually, genuinely, consistently pointing you? Because your life today is the answer to that question as you have been answering it for months and years. And here's the powerful part. You can change the answer, starting today, not by changing your circumstances first, but by changing your thinking first. Change the thinking, the circumstances follow. That is the order. That is the sequence that almost no one respects. And it is why almost no one masters their life. Let me tell you something important. The most dangerous poverty is not the poverty of the wallet. It is the poverty of the mind. A person with an empty wallet and a rich, disciplined, expansive mind will find their way back to abundance with a certainty that borders on inevitability. History is full of such people. But a person with a full wallet and a small, fearful, undisciplined mind will find their way back to scarcity with an equal certainty. Because the wallet does not drive the life. The mind drives the life. Always, every time, without exception. This is why the work of mastering your mind is not optional if you are serious about the life you say you want. It is the first work. It is the foundational work. It is the work upon which every other effort in your life either stands or collapses. You can develop the finest set of skills in your industry. You can build the most impressive network of contacts. You can read every book ever written on strategy and technique. But if the mind directing those skills, that network, and that knowledge is undisciplined, unfocused, and full of self-doubt, then you are building an extraordinary structure on a foundation of sand, and sand does not hold. The major value in life is not what you get. The major value in life is what you become. Let that settle in, because it reorients everything. We live in a world that is obsessed with getting. Get more money, get more followers, get more recognition, get more comfort. And none of those things are wrong to want, but the person who makes getting the primary goal has misunderstood the game entirely. The primary goal is becoming. Getting is the byproduct. Becoming is the cause. Getting is the shadow. Becoming is the substance that casts it. Think about that distinction for a moment and feel the weight of it. When you orient your life around getting, every day that you have not yet gotten what you want feels like failure. You are perpetually behind, perpetually insufficient, perpetually frustrated. But when you orient your life around becoming, every single day is progress. Every book you read, every hard conversation you have with yourself, every time you choose discipline over comfort, every time you face a fear and move forward anyway, all of it counts. All of it builds. Because becoming is cumulative. It compounds. Like interest in a bank account, every deposit of self-discipline, every deposit of honest self-examination, every deposit of persistence in the face of resistance, it does not disappear. It accumulates. And over time, it becomes a force that nothing in the world can easily stop. Now understand something important. The mind does not change by accident. It does not become stronger, clearer, more disciplined, or more powerful simply because time passes. Time does not improve the mind any more than it improves a piece of iron left out in the rain. Without intentional work, time does not refine you. It rusts you. The mind that is not deliberately developed becomes smaller, more fearful, more rigid, more enslaved to its own oldest and least examined habits. The mind that is intentionally worked on, challenged, stretched, and held accountable to a higher standard, that mind becomes something extraordinary. And a person with an extraordinary mind, operating in an ordinary world, will always find a way to produce extraordinary results. This is not flattery. This is not inspiration for its own sake. This is a simple and observable law of human life. Look around you. The people who produce the most remarkable results over a lifetime are not always the most talented. They are not always the best educated. They are not always the ones who started with the most resources or the most favorable circumstances. They are the ones who learn to govern their minds, who learn to choose their thoughts deliberately rather than simply suffer whatever thoughts arrived, who learn to question the voice inside them that said, "You cannot," and answer it back with evidence, with action, with persistence, who learn that the mind is not a fixed thing given to you at birth, but a living instrument you either sharpen or neglect every single day of your life. Discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment. Now let me press on this, because the word discipline is one of the most misunderstood words in the entire vocabulary of personal development. Most people hear the word discipline and feel a kind of dull dread. They picture sacrifice. They picture the absence of pleasure. They picture an austere, joyless commitment to things that are hard. And because that picture is unattractive, they avoid discipline, telling themselves they will embrace it when conditions are better, when they feel more motivated, when the season of their life is more suitable. And the conditions never become better. The motivation never reliably arrives. The suitable season never comes. And the goals remain goals, and the accomplishment remains absent. And the bridge between the two was never built. Here is what discipline actually is, stripped of all the dread and misunderstanding. Discipline is simply the practice of doing what you have decided is important, regardless of how you feel in the moment. That is all it is. It is not punishment. It is not deprivation. It is the act of honoring your own commitments. It is the act of respecting your future self enough to take the actions today that your future self will need. A farmer who plants seeds does not feel like planting on every single morning of the season. There are mornings when the sky is heavy, when the body is tired, when the work seems far too large for the result it will eventually produce. But the farmer plants anyway. Not because the feeling is there, but because the understanding is there. The understanding that the harvest does not negotiate with your moods. The harvest responds to your actions. And disciplined action, taken consistently and without waiting for the feeling to arrive first, is what separates the farmer who eats in winter from the farmer who does not. Now, ask yourself honestly, in your own life, how many times have you had the goal clearly in mind, had the knowledge of what needed to be done, perhaps even had the desire burning inside you and still did not do the work? Not because you lacked the ability, not because the obstacle was truly insurmountable, but because the feeling was not there, because the discipline to act without the feeling had not yet been built. And here is what that costs you. Every time you wait for the feeling before you act, you teach your mind that the feeling is in charge. You train yourself repeatedly and powerfully to be governed by mood rather than by decision. And a life governed by mood is a life that will forever rise and fall with the weather of the moment, never building anything that lasts, never accumulating the kind of consistent effort that eventually produces the results that most people only dream about. The mind must be trained to obey the will must be trained to serve the vision, and the vision must be held clearly, deliberately, and with conviction, regardless of what the present circumstances are saying. That is the architecture of mastery. That is the structure that turns goals into accomplishments, dreams into realities, and ordinary days of consistent effort into extraordinary lives. We must all suffer one of two things: the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. There is no third option. That is not pessimism, that is arithmetic. Every day you choose one or the other, whether you are conscious of the choice or not. The pain of discipline is the discomfort of doing the work when you do not feel like it. The discomfort of saying no to the easy thing so you can say yes to the important thing. The discomfort of choosing the longer, harder path because you know where it leads, even when the shorter, easier path is right there and very inviting. That pain is real. It asks something of you, but it is a pain that builds something. It is constructive suffering, if you will. It deposits into the account of your becoming. The pain of regret is different. The pain of regret is the pain of looking back at the years and seeing clearly what you could have done, what you could have become, what you could have built, if you had simply been willing to endure the smaller pain earlier. And unlike the pain of discipline, which diminishes as the habits form and the character strengthens and the new identity takes root, the pain of regret does not diminish. It tends to grow, because as time passes and the gap between what you are and what you could have been becomes wider and more visible, the regret does not soften, it sharpens. It becomes the companion of people who chose comfort over growth, and it is a far less forgiving companion than discipline ever was. Let that sink in. The pain is coming either way. You do not get to avoid suffering by avoiding discipline. You only get to choose which kind of suffering you are willing to accept, and one of those kinds of suffering leaves you with something. The other leaves you with nothing but the clear and permanent knowledge of what might have been. Choose the pain that builds. Choose it consciously. Choose it daily. Choose it especially on the days when every part of you wants to choose comfort instead. Because those are precisely the days when the choice matters most, when the discipline is most deeply impressed upon the character, when the mind is most powerfully trained in the direction of the person you are deciding to become. Now think about the role that your beliefs play in all of this. Because the mind does not just drive your actions through discipline or the lack of it. The mind also drives your actions through the beliefs you hold about yourself, about the world, and about what is possible for you. And most people are walking around with a set of beliefs that were never genuinely chosen. They were inherited, absorbed from parents, from teachers, from early experiences, from failures that felt definitive when they were simply instructive, from other people's opinions that were stated with enough confidence and repeated with enough frequency that they eventually took up permanent residence in the mind as if they were facts. But here's what you need to understand about beliefs. A belief is not a fact. It is a story you have told yourself so many times that it has stopped feeling like a story. I am not the kind of person who succeeds at this. People like me do not get to have that. I have already missed my window. I tried before and it did not work. These are not truths. They are narratives. They are interpretations of experiences, dressed up in the language of certainty. And interpretations can be questioned. Narratives can be rewritten. The story your mind is telling you about what is possible for your life is not set in stone. It was never set in stone. It only feels that way because the story has been told so many times, in so many moments of self-doubt and discouragement, that the mind has come to accept it as the landscape of reality rather than what it actually is, which is a choice. A choice that can be unmade and remade. If you really want to do something, you will find a way. If you do not, you will find an excuse. Now sit with that. Because there is a version of every person listening to this who has a story for why the great thing they want has not happened yet. The economy, the timing, the lack of resources, the relationships that did not work out, the doors that did not open. And I am not dismissing any of that. Circumstances are real. Challenges are real. There are genuine obstacles in this world, and pretending otherwise helps no one. But here's the question the honest mind must ask. Has the primary energy been directed toward finding the way or toward explaining the excuse? Because the mind is extraordinarily good at whichever one you ask it to do. Ask it to find the way, and it will find the way. Give it a problem and a genuine commitment to solving it, and it will bend the circumstances around the commitment one creative step at a time. But ask it to justify the standstill, and it will justify the standstill with such thorough and convincing logic that after a while even you believe it completely. The discipline of the mind, then, is not only the discipline of action, it is the discipline of thought. It is the daily practice of catching the excuse-making and replacing it with the question-asking. What can I do? What is the next step, even if it is small? What would a person who was genuinely committed to this do right now, today, with the resources they actually have? These are not comfortable questions. They require a kind of courage, but they are the questions that the minds of effective people ask habitually, automatically, as a first response rather than as a last resort. And that habit of thought is not something they were born with. It is something they built deliberately, through practice. The same way every habit of mind is built, through deliberate, consistent, repeated choice. Affirmation without discipline is the beginning of delusion. Let me be very direct here, because this truth is uncomfortable in a world that has developed an enormous affection for the idea that simply believing hard enough is sufficient. It is not. Belief is the starting point. Conviction is the fuel. A clear and powerful vision of where you are going and who you are becoming is absolutely essential. Without it, the discipline has no direction. Without it, the effort feels arbitrary and the inevitable hard days will break you. So the vision, the belief, the inner conviction, all of it matters enormously. But it is the beginning, not the end. It is the seed, not the harvest. And a seed that is planted in rich, well-prepared soil, watered consistently, and given the conditions it needs to grow, will become something magnificent. But a seed that is only admired, only talked about, only held up to the light and declared to be full of potential, while the soil around it remains untended and the water never comes, that seed will produce exactly nothing, no matter how beautiful it is, no matter how much potential it genuinely contains. The world is full of people with beautiful seeds, people with genuine talent and real vision, and authentic desire. What the world is less full of is people who are willing to do the unglamorous, daily, consistent, often invisible work of tending the soil, of showing up when no one is watching, of doing the work when it feels like the work is producing nothing, of persisting through the long winter between the planting and the harvest, trusting the process when the process has not yet yielded visible results. That trust, that persistence through the invisible period, is where most people fold. And it is precisely where the masters of the mind refuse to fold. Because the master of the mind understands something the others do not. The work is never wasted. Every day of disciplined effort is changing you, even when it is not yet visibly changing your circumstances. The roots are growing before the tree is visible, always. Think about a tree in a storm. When the wind comes and tests the structure of the trees that hold are not the ones with the most impressive branches. They are the ones with the deepest roots. And roots are built in the quiet. They are built in the ordinary days that no one celebrates. They are built in the seasons of growth that look like nothing is happening from the outside. The branches and the leaves, those are visible. Those are what people admire. But it is the roots that determine whether the thing stands or falls when the storm arrives. And in a life, the roots are your habits, your character, your daily disciplines, your willingness to govern your mind rather than be governed by it. Those roots are built in silence, and they are tested in crisis, and they determine everything. Work harder on yourself than you do on your job. This is perhaps the most practically powerful piece of guidance in the entire vocabulary of personal development, and it is also perhaps the most consistently ignored. Because the job feels urgent. The job has deadlines. The job has expectations attached to it. The job will notice if you do not show up. And so the energy, the focus, the best hours of the day, the majority of the deliberate effort, all of it flows toward the job. While the self, the person doing the job, the mind directing the effort, the character shaping the decisions that gets whatever is left over, if anything is left over, a tired, distracted, harried 15 minutes at the end of a long day when the capacity for genuine reflection or genuine learning is at its absolute lowest, and then people wonder why the years pass and the job improves and yet the life somehow does not. The job is the application of who you are. The self is the source. And in any system, you do not improve the output by working only on the output. You improve the output by improving the source. You improve the river by improving the spring. You improve the fruit by improving the tree. You improve the performance by improving the performer. And improving the performer means working on the mind, deliberately, consistently, in the best hours you have available, not the leftover ones. It means reading not casually, but with intention. It means examining your own patterns of thought and behavior with honesty and without the protective layers of self-justification. It means asking hard questions of yourself and sitting with the discomfort of the honest answers instead of fleeing back into distraction. Now, ask yourself honestly, when was the last time you invested in yourself the way you invest in everything else that matters to you? When was the last time you gave your own development the same quality of attention you give to the things the world considers urgent? Because the world will always have urgent things. The inbox will always be full. The demands will never completely subside. If you wait for the quieter season to work on yourself, the quieter season will never arrive. The work on the self must be scheduled. It must be protected. It must be treated as the non-negotiable foundation that everything else is built on, because that is precisely what it is. You cannot change your destination overnight, but you can change your direction overnight. And this is the gift within all of this. You do not have to have it all figured out before you begin. You do not need to see the entire staircase from where you are standing. You need to see the next step and then take it. The direction is what matters first, not the speed, not the distance already covered. The direction. Because a ship moving in the wrong direction, no matter how powerfully its engines are running, no matter how skilled its crew, no matter how modern its navigation systems, is moving steadily and efficiently toward the wrong destination. Whereas a ship that changes its heading by even a few degrees, and then maintains that new heading consistently day after day, mile after mile, will eventually arrive at an entirely different and far better place. That few-degree shift is available to you right now, not tomorrow, not when the circumstances improve, not after you have resolved the current difficulty or finished the current obligation. Now. The shift happens in the mind first. It happens when you make a genuine, committed, unambiguous decision about the direction you are choosing. Not a wish, not a vague hope, a decision. The kind of decision that changes the quality of the next action you take, and the one after that, and the one after that. Because every action that follows a real decision is different from every action that follows a wish. The wish leaves you passive, waiting to see what happens. The decision makes you active, making things happen. And it is the makers, not the waiters, who determine the shape of their own lives. Do not wait for the perfect moment. The perfect moment is a myth The unprepared mind tells itself to justify postponement. The moment you have is this one. It is imperfect, as all moments are. It is complicated, as all seasons of life are. But it is real, it is available, and it is sufficient. If you are willing to bring to it the discipline, the honest thought, the clear direction, and the consistent action that we have been talking about, that is enough. The moment and the willingness together are always enough. Motivation is what gets you started. Habit is what keeps you going. This is a truth that almost every person in the early stages of trying to change their life fails to take seriously enough. Motivation is magnificent. That initial surge of energy and clarity and commitment, that feeling of this time it is different, this time I mean it. This time I am going to build the thing and become the person. It is real and it is powerful and it genuinely does get things started. But motivation is not a reliable engine for the long road. It is a spark, not a sustained flame. It will peak and it will ebb. It will be high on the days when the progress is visible and the momentum is building and the encouragement is coming from outside. And it will be low on the days when the progress is invisible, when the obstacles appear larger than the momentum, when the people around you do not understand what you are building or why. If you are depending on motivation to keep you going on those low days, you will stop. Almost certainly. Because motivation is not there on the low days, at least not consistently. What is there, if you have built it, is habit. And habit is something entirely different from motivation. Habit is automatic. Habit does not negotiate with your mood. Habit does not require the feeling to be there before the action follows. When the behavior has been repeated enough times, in enough consistent contexts, with enough deliberate practice, it stops being a choice that requires willpower and motivation and becomes simply what you do, the way you brush your teeth, the way you put on your shoes. You do not motivate yourself every morning to brush your teeth. You simply do it because it is the habit, because it is built into the structure of the day, because the mind has long since stopped treating it as optional. The goal, then, is not to stay permanently motivated. The goal is to act with enough consistency in the early days, when the motivation is there to support you, that by the time the motivation inevitably wanes, the habit is already formed. The bridge is already built. And then when the low days come, and they always come, the habit carries you across the gap that the motivation can no longer cover. Picture water moving over stone. A single pass of water over stone does nothing visible to the stone. The stone looks exactly the same after one pass as it did before. But water moving over that same stone every single day in the same path, with the same patient consistency over time that water carves a canyon, not because of force, not because of drama, because of repetition, sustained, patient, almost boring repetition. That is what habit does to a life. It carves, quietly, consistently, and over time, with extraordinary power. And here is what happens when the habit is formed and the mind is genuinely mastered. Here is the thing that becomes true that is almost impossible to explain to someone who has not yet experienced it. The effort stops feeling like effort in the old way. The discipline stops feeling like sacrifice. The work that once required willpower begins to feel like identity. You are no longer fighting yourself to do the work. You are simply being yourself by doing the work. The discipline has become character. The practice has become personality. And at that point, success is not just possible and not just likely. At that point, success is the natural expression of who you have become. It is the harvest that a well-tended field must inevitably produce. It cannot do otherwise. Nature does not fail the farmer who has genuinely and consistently done the work of preparing the soil, planting the seed, and tending the growth. Nature responds to effort the way it always has and always will, faithfully, completely, without exception. Don't wish it were easier. Wish you were better. Let this be the lens through which you see every difficulty that stands between you and the life you are building. not as evidence that the path is wrong or the goal is too big or the timing is off, but as the very mechanism through which the becoming happens. The difficulty is not in the way. The difficulty is the way, because you do not build the strength you need for a great life in comfortable circumstances. You build it in the hard ones. You do not develop the judgment required for great decisions by avoiding difficult situations. You develop it by moving through them, making the calls, living with the consequences, learning from the outcomes, and bringing that learning forward into the next challenge. Every obstacle you face and move through makes you more capable of facing the next one. Every fear you confront and walk through, despite the fear, makes you less controlled by fear. Every moment of discomfort you choose voluntarily in service of growth makes you more comfortable with discomfort as a general condition of living, and a person who is comfortable with discomfort has an almost unlimited range of action compared to a person who is not. This is the paradox at the center of all genuine growth. You become comfortable by repeatedly practicing discomfort. You become fearless by repeatedly practicing courage. You become disciplined by repeatedly practicing discipline. There is no shortcut around the practice. The practice is the path. The difficulty you are wishing away is the very tool being used to build the version of you that can hold and sustain and direct the success you are working toward. Without that difficulty, the success would arrive to a person who is not yet ready for it, and it would slip through hands that have not been developed enough to hold it. This is why people who acquire success without the internal development to match it so often cannot hold it. The external got ahead of the internal. The harvest arrived before the roots were deep enough, and the structure collapsed under the weight of what it was not yet prepared to carry. Do not rush the becoming. Work it every day with intention and urgency and commitment, yes. But understand that the deepening of character, the strengthening of the mind, the development of genuine mastery, these things take the time they take, and they cannot be meaningfully compressed. What they can be is consistent. And consistency over time is the closest thing to a guarantee that exists in the field of human achievement. Now, let all of this settle into a single clear picture of what mastering your mind actually means in the daily practice of your life. It means this. It means that every morning when you wake, the first authority you answer to is not the comfort of the bed, not the anxiety of the unread messages, not the noise of a world that has 10,000 things it wants to insert into your attention before you have had a single moment with your own thoughts. The first authority you answer to is the vision you have set for the person you are becoming. What does that person do this morning? How does that person think about this day? What does that person refuse to accept from themselves in terms of excuse or postponement or the comfortable lie that tomorrow will be better for the hard work than today is? It means that when the resistance comes, and it always comes, you do not treat it as a stop sign. You treat it as the next repetition in the practice of building the mind that can hold the life you want. It means that when the voice of self-doubt speaks, you do not silence it with affirmation alone. You answer it with action. Specifically, with the next disciplined action in the direction of your vision. Because action is the language the mind believes most deeply. You can tell yourself you are capable, and that helps. But showing yourself you are capable through action, through repeated evidence, through the accumulated proof of 100 mornings when you did the work rather than avoiding it. That is what finally persuades the deepest parts of the mind that the story has genuinely changed. It means you stop measuring your progress against other people's timelines and other people's definitions of success, and start measuring it against the only comparison that has ever been honest or useful. Who you were yesterday versus who you are today. Are you more disciplined today than you were last month? Is your mind clearer, your focus sharper, your habits more aligned with your vision? Are you bringing more of your genuine capacity to bear on the life you are building than you were a year ago? That is the scorecard. That is the only one that matters. Because the race you are in is not against anyone else. It never was. It is the race to become the fullest, most capable, most disciplined, and most genuinely excellent version of yourself. And that race has no external finish line. It is a lifelong pursuit, which means every single day is both a starting line and a victory lap, depending on how you choose to see it. Success is nothing more than a few simple disciplines practiced every day, not 100 things. Not a revolution, not a perfect plan executed under perfect conditions. A few simple disciplines. The discipline of governing the mind, the discipline of showing up for the work regardless of the mood, the discipline of choosing the long-term becoming over the short-term comfort, the discipline of being honest with yourself about where you are going, and what the gap between the two actually requires of you. The discipline of investing in your own development with the same seriousness you bring to everything else that matters. A few simple things, practiced not occasionally, not when the feeling is there, not when the circumstances cooperate. Every single day. The simplicity of it is what makes it so difficult for most people to accept. We want it to be more complicated. We want the secret to be hidden in some advanced technique, some rare insight, some esoteric system that only the fortunate few ever encounter. Because if it is that complicated and rare, then our failure to have done it is understandable, forgivable. But if the answer is this simple, this available, this utterly and completely within reach for any person willing to choose it, then there is no comfortable explanation for not having done it. Only the honest one. The honest one is that the disciplines were known but not practiced. The way was clear, but the walk was not taken. The choice was available every single day, and on most days a different choice was made. That is not condemnation. That is an invitation. Because every day that is behind you is finished. What happened in those days cannot be changed. But the day that is in front of you has not been written yet, and the day after that, and the one after that. Every one of them is an unwritten page, and you hold the pen, and the only question that has ever mattered is what you are going to write. Write discipline. Write honest effort. Write the daily practice of governing your mind toward the vision of the person you have decided to become. Write it in the actions of the morning, before the world has had a chance to insert its noise. Write it in the moments of resistance, when every comfortable alternative is available and the disciplined choice is the harder one. Write it in the habits you build so carefully that one day they stop being habits and start being simply who you are. You already know what needs to be done. That is the most honest thing that can be said about where most people are. The knowledge is not the missing piece. The willingness is. The daily, consistent, non-negotiable willingness to do the thing you know needs to be done without waiting for the perfect moment, without waiting for the fear to subside, without waiting for the motivation to arrive like weather you cannot control. Just doing the work, just governing the mind, just choosing, one more time, to be the person who acts rather than the person who waits. The life you want is not on the other side of a lucky break. It is not waiting for someone to give you permission. It is not held hostage by the economy or the season or the circumstances that currently surround you. It is on the other side of a mastered mind, a mind that knows what it wants and why it wants it, a mind that governs its own thoughts rather than being governed by them, a mind that chooses discipline over comfort, consistently enough that the discipline becomes character and the character becomes destiny. Master that mind. Begin today, not with a grand gesture, with the next right action. The one you already know you need to take. Take it now, without the excuse, without the delay, without the comfortable negotiation with yourself that ends in postponement. Take it now, because now is the only time that has ever been real. And a mind that acts now, and again now, and again now, that is a mind that has mastered the fundamental truth of all genuine achievement. The power is never out there. The power is always, without exception, in here.